inform my colleagues and the American people about some progress that's been made on a very important bipartisan piece of legislation, plus what a couple other committees are doing along the same line of keeping health care costs down, that we're making progress to reduce the price of prescription medicine for the American people. I've been tilling the fields of legislative policy long enough to know that we have our work cut out for us. Ranking Member and I of the Finance Committee started out 6 months ago to cultivate a bipartisan consensus for much-needed reforms. We knew that we had a long row to hoe. Our efforts to reduce drug prices face big-time opposition from Big Pharma. As we work side by side in a Republican and Democrat way, we've planted the seeds to grow a strong bipartisan coalition. One strong enough, I believe, to withstand the influence of moneyed special interests. Now, it should be no surprise to anybody that Big Pharma and other stakeholders in the drug supply chain are working 6 ways from Sunday to throw sand in our gears. We know that they will continue to fight us during the August work period. As a lifelong farmer from Iowa, I learned a long time ago the fruits of one's labor won't be worth a hill of beans without proper groundwork. For months, we've been tilling the soil and fertilizing the legislative fields to bear fruit at harvest time. We've teamed up with leadership of other key committees of jurisdiction. Together with the chairman and ranking member of the Senate Health Committee, Senators Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray, and the chairman and ranking members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senators Lindsey Graham and Dianne Feinstein, the U.S. Senate has a real opportunity this Congress to deliver meaningful reforms that would yield real savings for what Americans spend on health care. Both the Health and the Judiciary Committees have advanced legislative packages that help address drug prices, including bills that I've sponsored, such as the CREATES Act, the Stop Stalling Act, and the Prescription Pricing for People Act. Since January, the Finance Committee that Senator Wyden and I lead as chair, has held a series of hearings to examine the vulnerabilities in drug supply chains that are ripe for abuse. We don't have answers to all the problems, but it's really crystal clear. A strong dose of transparency is desperately needed to shed light on a convoluted pricing system in dealing with prescription drugs. From the drug manufacturers to the patient's medicine cabinet, the drug supply chain is shrouded in secrecy and is very exceedingly complex. This opaque pricing system has allowed exorbitant price hikes to climb higher and higher and higher with no end in sight. Don't forget, the taxpayers of the United States foot the bill for the lion's share of prescription drugs through Medicare and Medicaid. The woolly drug supply chain allows taxpayers to be fleeced year after year. We need to let the sunshine in to help root out our abusive practices. Secrecy in the supply chain has grown into noxious weed damaging our free market ecosystem. Transparency is needed to help rein in unsustainable costs threatening the fiscal viability of Medicaid and Medicare. Seniors, individuals with disability, and low-income Americans depend on these programs for life-saving medicine and innovative cures. Last week, the Senate Finance Committee approved the bipartisan Prescription Drug Price Reduction Act. The carefully sewn Grassley-Wyden bill limits seniors' out-of-pocket costs without limiting access to life-saving cures Americans expect. It injects reasonable incentives in government prescription drug programs for drug manufacturers and insurers to keep prices low. Pharmaceutical companies and insurers need to have more skin in the game to keep prices down. It also fixes flawed policies that distort free market principles to lower the lid on spending. Now, we all know in our town meetings and other places we go, Americans have spoken very loudly on this subject. They want high prescription drug prices addressed. Furthermore, Americans want Congress to act and act now. The Senate Finance, Help, and Judiciary Committees have acted. Now it's time to get the job done. As lawmakers go home over the August recess, I encourage each of you to share the good news with your constituents. Americans are fed up with sticker shock at the pharmacy counter. We have the opportunity to deliver a badly needed legislative remedy. First, we've got to drain the swampy special interests blocking the path to victory. The moneyed players in the drug supply chain will use the August recess to unleash a public relations blitz against our bipartisan effort. You can bet the farm that big pharma, hospitals, pharmacy benefit managers will whip themselves into a real frenzy to kill these bipartisan reforms. Let's remember why we started down this path in the first place. It's simply democracy working, representative government working. Americans are demanding relief at the prescription counter. We hear it from our constituents in our town meetings, in our letters, in our emails, and the phone calls that we get. Unchecked drug prices are putting Medicare and Medicaid in financial peril. The payment structure is unmoored from fiscal reality, and the American taxpayer is on the hook. Congress has a real opportunity to do something about this spiraling of drug prices. For my colleagues who are on the fence, and there's nothing wrong with being on the fence because you've got plenty of time to become acquainted with an issue you hear from your constituents all the time. Become acquainted with our solution. So for these colleagues who are on the fence about our bipartisan proposal, these are a series of questions I want you to ask yourself. Do Americans want us to act to reduce runaway drug prices? Do Americans want to keep access to breakthrough drug therapies and innovation? Do older Americans want protection from coverage gaps and out-of-pocket costs? Do people with disabilities and poorer and elderly Americans who depend on Medicaid deserve access to innovative cures and next-generation therapies? The answer to all these questions, I think, is a resounding yes. Farmers are smart enough to make hay while the sun shines. Let's apply that time-tested farm lesson here in the Congress. Don't bail out on the opportunity to make a meaningful difference for the people that we're elected to serve. Too many Americans are rationing or skipping doses because they can't afford their prescription medicine. So, as I started out, I finish now by saying on behalf of Senator Wyden, Senator Alexander, Senator Murray, Senator Graham, Senator Feinstein, and others, I suggest to our colleagues, this is our Goldilocks moment. Let's not let it be a gridlock moment. Our legislative reforms are not too far right and not too far left. That's what makes our bipartisan remedy to lower prescription drug prices just exactly right for the American people.